Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. And we are joined now by the one and only Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. What's up, BC?
Oh, not a lot. How are you guys?
Good, BC. How are things?
Pretty good. I just started like a 10-week kickboxing workout program,
Ooh.
so you're gonna hardly recognize me by July or August.
You
But my muscles are hurting today.
You gonna look like Jake Gyllenhaal in Southpaw? You getting all shredded up?
It's gonna be something. I feel. Yeah.
BC, it's funny. You'd be one of those guys as chill as the day is long, and somebody would kind of say something to you slick in the press box, and all of a sudden they get a roundhouse, and you'd be the guy to apologize and help him up. He's like, "Hey, you know what?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, Sam.
I'm sorry
I didn't mean to do that. Or are you okay?" And I could totally see it, man. The consummate nice guy.
Well, at this moment, it takes quite a while for my roundhouse to develop. It takes a couple seconds for me to turn my body and really plant. So you do have time probably to derail my move at this moment, but we'll see how it goes over the next 5 to 6 weeks at least.
BC, you're probably not going to answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I think it's funny. If there was anybody in the press box that you would want a roundhouse kick, who would it be?
You're right. You're right. You answered your own question. I'm not going to answer that.
Just say Shafe. It's okay.
No, it's not safe. There's probably a person or two. Yeah, but I'm not going to say it.
God bless you, BC.
All right, moving right along. Did you think on June 12th we would be talking about an NAIA quarterback possibly joining Nebraska's room?
Well, that would have been a very specific prediction that I would have got that.
What about June 13th? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, that was here's what I like about the story. Whatever happens with it is I had a chance to talk with him Monday, Graham's dad, and I like the fact that he had that conversation with family, and it was actually he was talking with his grandpa like a week or two ago. And it was just one of those talks you can have with the people who are closest to you where it's like, put yourself out there, go chase something. And so whatever happened, obviously Nebraska has to make the right decisions for their roster on who they offer to join the program and all that. I'm not trying to force anything. But I just like the personal story because I think we've all been there in certain situations where you get that advice or you get that extra nudge from someone close to you and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to attack this. He feels like he accomplished, which he has, most of what he can at that level. And he feels like he could contribute at least in that room in some way. He's got a winning mindset and threw for a lot of touchdowns. Obviously people who understand the tiered system of college football know that NAIA is a few steps down, so you got to process that. But certainly, when you're talking about if you could add a fifth quarterback or something to the equation, you're thinking about a guy who's I think really like got the mental component at a high level and has kind of proven that. And he would seem to fit the bill in that category. So we'll see where it goes. But I like that. He just said, I'm going for this, kind of spontaneous, and it was a fun camp story for sure.
BC, it's interesting. Now, one's 24 and one's 25, but you got Star, you've got Duty Arno, that are a couple of DBs that have been offered by Nebraska. Well, wait, is Star's 25, isn't he? Yeah,
he is.
Yeah, he's 25. So both 25s at the cornerback spot. Both were previously committed. We'll see. Star said Nebraska's offer kind of came out of nowhere. When you're looking at, are you intrigued, interested, concerned, just the price of doing business when you look at the amount of offers and the time of these offers for defensive back spots?
I guess is this to the narrative of that they need to, that you got to bulk up that secondary even a little bit more.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, there's some connection there, but I've thought that for a while. I mean, I left spring, and I think on this show I said the one area in the defense I'm kind of wondering about is like I like the like 3 or 4 or 5. There's like 3 or 4 or 5 main guys about, but you don't quite know how some of that young depth is going to rise up and where they're at for sure. I think they got a lot of talent there, but there's room for some new guys, guys who are just getting here even. Guys in this next recruiting class over the next 2 years to carve out space. So I don't think it's a position room where if you're a recruit looking in at it, yeah, there's a lot of bodies, but I don't think you would say I can't make something happen there. You would look at it and say, okay, they've got like 3, 4, 5 guys that are kind of established, but they're going to need more than that, and it might as well be me. So it does compute to sort of how I've seen it. And I know it's how you've seen it because I think it was a show or two ago when I was on with you. We were talking about that very thing. It was, that I like the top line a lot. Like I love what Tommy Hill can be with his consistency and stuff. Obviously Giff is like the dude who sort of runs things back there, I feel like, and Marquise and Deshaun. But then there's the other side. You don't know what Bly Hill's injury situation, how long that will take. Even if he is back, he hasn't really played at this level before. Jeremiah Charles, another guy who has all the talent in the world, we know that, but hasn't played at this level. So it is very much a development position still in some spots where a recruit, I think, would look at it and say, yeah, that could be appealing to me. I could go in there and compete right away. So it did not surprise me. That was a long answer to get to that.
How much are we kind of I'd say kind of at peace just because it seems to be that's the way that Coop likes it. Highly competitive.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a pee or get off the pot kind of thing. Like he seems to have a really, really good grasp of at least knowing what ingredients he wants to start to cook. And if it doesn't turn over, he'll just start over again with another meal.
Yeah, I mean, you got to, and you just always got to keep guys on their toes a little bit.
And that's the way he loves it.
Yep, that next crop of guys. Any recruit out there needs to understand that you're a 25 or 26 guy now. You're going to sort of feel like you're the flavor for a bit. There's going to be a time when you get in the program and then everybody's going to be writing about some other high school junior, that is going to, that could join the program, and he just tested this way and that way. And you've just got to find those guys who have the mindset like, I understand that's the way it is. I like that. I'll bring in another guy. I'll beat him out too. And if you can find yourself, I don't know how many you need back there that are like in that level, but I think you need like 10 or so, like that you just feel like they could fit in this rotation right now. And then you've got some guys who are on the cusp of being there, and they might very well be able to accomplish that.
That's a great. Say that again, BC. 10 guys, and then another handful that are on the cusp. Right? I hear that right?
Yeah. Yes, I did. And we were just talking about that on our pod the other day about like with the defensive line as an example of that. It's like finding that rotation where guys understand. It's maybe a little bit different with the DBs, but like some defensive linemen where maybe their role for that first year is you try to work to like 6 to 8 snaps, like you're that guy who has like 6 to 8 snaps. Then there's that guy who sometimes that 15 to 20 snap. And then you make that move like Nash Hutmaker made, last year. If we were talking about him 12 months ago, he was like on the cusp fringe type defensive lineman, and we forgot about that a month into the season and like how solid he was. But my point being, it's sort of on the defensive line got that wheel spinning, right? Where it's like, okay, they're now starting. They have these guys who are showing like what it can be like when you work at it for 3-4 years and where you can get. But you also need those guys who are developing in that first or second year where maybe it's not quite their time yet, but they're like on the 2 deep or on the edge of it, and they can see it. They can find a role here or there. and they can see where it's going to lead, and they trust in the coaching staff that if they keep going, they can be like this other guy in front of them who did the same thing they did. So
Yep.
I think that's what you're trying to do in every room.
You know what? 100% right. Because whether you're Malachi Coleman or you're Lloyd or you're Doss or, a handful of weeks ago, I'd have said the same thing about Ethan Nation. Like when you're a young guy and you get a little bit of a taste early, the key is to build upon it from the next year, because this staff has proven that they'll continue to recruit. It's almost like, you have to be mature enough to hear what I'm saying. Not you, but the context of this conversation. I almost felt like, when you go from like a Ken Clark to a Leotis Flowers to Derek Brown and Calvin Jones to, the next group, and then there's LP, then there's Amon, then there's Dean, where you're looking to see what's happening the next year, but you have to get to a point where you're motivated by it and not fearful of it, right? Like you can't be the person that is looking behind your shoulder. You just got to be the best version of yourself and trust that you got to really buy into that next man up, because it doesn't seem that they're going to hold off on going to get fellas.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like it's not just a coaching mindset. The players have to buy into that too.
Yeah. I mean, it helps though a ton when you do have those examples in your very room in front of you where the coach can say, I mean, look at this guy. He was you like 1 or 2 years ago. Just keep going with the process. So you're going to have to bust your butt, no doubt about it. There's no guarantees, but this is what can happen. And I think a lot of guys are believing that because the evidence would be players from Nebraska went in the portal, really. And I know, like the fact that when Ethan Nation goes in the portal or is not on the roster anymore, I should say, It's sort of like, oh, what's that? That everywhere else, that's just been like common for the last 2 months, like guys coming and going and all this stuff. And around here, it was like, oh, we haven't been used to that in a little bit. And so I think that speaks well probably to even the younger guys who maybe the first year they were behind the scenes and they're not out front yet. They're still at least believing, in the staff and like, okay, if I put in the work, I can get there. And there's evidence that that's true with this guy and that guy, and I can be that guy too.
We're talking to Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, it's funny as we talk about this secondary conversation because, DB and I were, I think maybe skeptical is too strong of a word, but we had some concerns about kind of the depth in the secondary there. But then I kind of remember back to what the situation was last year when we didn't trust any of these guys. We're like, what do you mean Deshaun Singleton's going to be one of the, or what are we going to,
Tommy Hill?
Why are we doing, why is Tommy Hill out there all the time? Well, like pick a guy, right? Or can Isaac Gifford really play safety, or is he a tweener? What are we going to do with him? And so it is kind of funny at the same time where it's like, yeah, there is concerns about the depth. But last year, there were also concerns about the guys that were like, these are now the guys that I trust implicitly.
Yeah, that's a total Coop thing.
Yep. And the top line's pretty good. I mean, I was thinking about this, like, I mean, you've heard Cooper on Gifford. I mean, he thinks is one of the best players in the country.
And Coop is stingy with compliments.
Yeah.
Like, they're just hard to come by.
Like I was flipping through like one of the summer magazines the other day, and there wasn't really a mention of Giff, like in the like all Big Ten stuff, 3 teams deep, and I'm thinking like, man, I feel like he belongs on there somewhere. And then Tommy Hill, like I know people say, okay, I just want to see it consistent because there has been a little bit of a roller coaster with him at times. But last November, you felt like maybe that had leveled off, and I think people are feeling really strong if he can carry that momentum forward. And like we had a list at 24/7. I had nothing to do with it, but one of our national guys had him on the list of 10 guys who could really be breakout performers. So there, and then Marquise, I think, is one of the smartest guys they've got over there. He just picks stuff up fast. And obviously we know Deshaun, if he's fully healthy, I think he's the next level guy. So you've got a nice starting base is what I'm getting at with 4 to 5 names. And now it's just getting the group that's little below him right now and still figuring things out to come up. And maybe you find that one young special talent too. That has happened here before in other places where there's a freshman or sophomore cornerback who suddenly is out there and he's pretty darn good and he's salty. And obviously I left off Hartzog, but I mean, Malcolm Hartzog's like a key piece in all of this because he can do a lot of different things. So they do have to keep bulking it up, and you always keep guys on their toes, but they also, at least at the very top end, I think they have a good starting point, and now you just want to have that depth sort of established.
I have to keep myself from just unabashedly and unsolicitedly supporting Malcolm Hartzog. He's just a guy. You know how I get with some of my guys that just get a spot in the old heart. Hartzog's definitely one of those guys, man. Doesn't say much. Did what they asked of him in the offseason. He looks fantastic. I just, as long as he's healthy and comfortable with a position group, I think he's just going to be a key cog. I feel like you and I always talk about him, but even in this conversation, we almost forgot to bring him up, right?
Yeah, that's true.
It's just kind of weird the position he holds with Nebraska's fan base. But I don't know. He's just one of those guys, BC. I'm hoping just has an incredible year because I think he's a super person.
He was one of the best talents to come out of the state of Mississippi. Great recruiting story. Everybody down there knew that he was like just one of those like football players. He's not to this level, so I don't want people to misunderstand this. But whenever I saw him or heard about him, I thought of like old Antoine Winfield. I thought of like Antoine Winfield Sr., like just like a guy who's a little undersized, but you just like, man, that guy is just such a player and just likes to hit and like be involved in everything. And he's got those sort of traits to me where he's just like a guy who, put him wherever, he's going to get something done as a football player. And so, yeah, I think he could be poised to have a nice jump this season. You heard Cooper in the spring, he thought maybe, Malcolm had to wear a lot of different hats and was sort of bouncing around last year. And maybe that caused some challenges at times. But you think back to his freshman year, I mean, he was where the ball was a whole lot. It just found him. He was magnet for it. And he was always in pretty good position, even on a couple plays where they got him. I mean, he was right there. So he's definitely a guy you feel good about going into camp with.
BC, is there another position group on the team that you view kind of the same way as you do the defensive backs, where you're like, hey, I like this handful of guys kind of at the front, got a lot of question marks after that?
I would say, I mean, O-line is going to seem like a strange answer, but I guess it's because I feel like there's like 5 or 6 that I know all about. And then it's like, okay, I like the names sort of, and I hear the names a lot, but I don't know quite what's in that cupboard yet. And it could be really good. Like, I think it can be. But I look at O-line, again, I'll go back to the D-line. I thought O-line made progress last year. I think the step that they could really make this year is making me feel more like the D-line did last year, where I just like, I honestly, a year ago at this time, I was kind of skeptical about what the defensive line was going to be like, and that they would have the depth that I feel like they've started to develop there. I think the O-line is trending that way, but sort of like the DBs, it's a group where I feel pretty good about some of the guys on the top line. And now it's like, okay, I really want to see like even some of those guys who are on the top line, like Justin Evans, like I want to see what he does, like how he can, where he can take his game this fall. And then you've got some of those guys from the last recruiting class who maybe we start to see sprinkled into more game reps, you're like Sam Sledge type guys. So I'm curious, like if we do get more of a taste of some of those 7, 8, 9, 10 guys in that room and what that looks like at times this season. But I feel good about where Rhule has got him going. I just it's just like, okay, give us a little more confirmation with the depth and stuff this year. And I think they can do it. Let's just see if they can.
Can I make an argument for you on a group that I actually really like, but can I make an argument for the wide receivers? You've got Jamal
Yeah,
Banks, who's got production at a different school. You've got Nair, who you're hoping bounces back from injury, but hasn't really produced in 2 years. You've got a couple of freshmen that produced some last year, but you're really hoping for a big jump. I mean, I really like that group and think it might end up being one of the best position groups on the team. But when you really dig into it, there's a lot of question marks there.
How about how much we talk about this group and we don't even bring up Malachi Coleman?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I said.
Do you know what I mean?
Freshmen.
It's like
I'm talking Coleman and Lloyd, basically.
But I do feel the level of excitement for this group is really, really high.
It definitely is. I almost said wide receiver to the answer, but I'm bullish on that group. But
so
I get what you're.
I love McGuire too. So again, I'm cheering for that group like crazy. He's amazing.
But like, if you wanted to look at it a certain way, you certainly could.
No, your point's well taken, Ravi. It's that it looks really good on paper, but then it's like, okay, I just want to see that step now from like I know like what Malachi Coleman can do in my head. Like I know that's there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just see it. Let's see it from Jalen. Ja'Cory, I think we got a taste of that in the spring. I think some of the things that honestly that have influenced me to really like believing in that group too is some of the things not talked about as much. It's like when I see Bonner come out there with the ones at the start of the spring game, with Banks and Nair and you're throwing some short screen type stuff and you got Bonner out there like as one of your dudes blocking, and I just like sort of how they're stacked size wise too. I mean, they've got sort of all flavors, and they've got some guys like Malachi and Bonner who I think can be really physical on the perimeter as blockers, and we won't talk as much about that, but I think it's going to be just instrumental to getting that short, passing game sort of rolling. So that's sort of why I've kind of come around on that group. We've been there before with the receivers, though. I always say this: it's been it feels like an 8 to 10 year adventure of trying to find that room where you feel like, okay, they got like 8 or 9 guys you really believe in. So I'm hoping this is the year we're watching a game like in early November. The weather's not that good, and you're not looking at Nebraska's receiver crew and thinking they've only got like 2 or 3 options I really believe in here, because I feel like that's been the past. So hopefully the past is that's where it is.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7 BC. We appreciate your time as always. Great stuff. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, B.
Reminder real quick here about the Team Jack Foundation. Make sure you get to teamjackfoundation.org to get involved. You can donate, you can volunteer, you can see what events are coming up. You can also see what projects are being funded by the Team Jack Foundation. You can get all the information you need there at teamjackfoundation.org. I don't know if you can get the information on what DB is doing over here right now, but
losing my mind.
We'll come back with Kevin Suits and see if we can figure it out. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. This is Hurrdat Sports Radio.